Great. Thank you so much for being on today. I'm very grateful to have you. How are you doing today, Roberto? Like,
I'm doing all right. It was a little bit of a late night.
yes, and I hope that you feel better because you've been traveling a lot and you've been doing amazing things for people.
Sure,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. You're welcome. All right. I've been a big fan of yours since like way back when you did the what was it, the YouTube with the what's it called, search engine and stuff with the small stuff. Why are you so passionate about helping others to build their YouTube business up?
Because it's not about YouTube. I think people take me out of context all the time. I think that people like the label YouTube guru because YouTube matters to them and they're very passionate about it. I love the platform for what it provides. The platform for me is not a destination or a goal. It's a vehicle or a tool to serve and facilitate getting somewhere you want to be or achieving a goal or ambition that you want, because it's a great equalizer, right? I mean, it's accessible, free hosting for large format video files, things that could be 4K video, things that could be gigs upon gigs, and it's free hosting and data storage, but also free media distribution and delivery, free traffic, free awareness and attention. And you can use that as either a platform to bring awareness to a cause, launch your business, develop your reputation and your personal brand, speak out about something that matters to you, or find a community of like-minded people so you don't have to feel like as much of a misfit. It's a great gift that we have, and I think that people don't understand what it's capable of doing for them. And I also don't think people appreciate it enough and take it for granted. I think people complain about it very easily. And I want to help people understand that YouTube is just a tool, just like anything else that I talk about on my channel. I've done over 1,200 videos on my YouTube channel, and only about 200 of them are about growing a YouTube channel. So I feel that I'm taken out of context of being a YouTube guru, when what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to educate people about how to do the best they can with what they have where they are, and that if they're in the sound within the sound of the reach of my videos or my voice, the odds are that they probably have more than they think they do, and they could be just doing so much more with it. Technology just is this wonderful gift. I was born in 1984. Like, I've seen the evolution of technology, right? I've seen us go from no internet to dial-up internet to DSL, broadband, Wi-Fi, invisible signals. I've seen us go from floppy disk to B drives to CDs to DVDs to USBs to cloud storage. It's amazing what we have. We're so blessed, and I don't think there's enough gratitude for what you can achieve versus what your parents used to be able to achieve or your grandparents used to be able to achieve, and that you have this wonderful opportunity to reach people. And YouTube's just one of those resources, but it's the second largest search engine in the world. There's a built-in audience for almost anything. And I think that once people understand what to do with it, my experience has been that through my content, a lot of people who said that they were struggling or they didn't have a voice or they felt like everything was against them, once they actually understood what the tool really was capable of and how to use it properly, the world opened up to them in a new way, and opportunities, revenue, awareness, community support, things changed for them. So that's why I'm passionate about it. Is it's a great tool. It's a great tool, and it's something that most people are naive about.
Yes, thank you so much for explaining about that because it's when you're starting as I am, and how can you? Because I'm passionate. I've been interviewing authors and best-selling authors. How can they build like a community? I know that they're so comfortable with Facebook and stuff like that. I feel like the YouTube is being underutilized. How can they build their brand and build their books and whatnot? How can they do it?
So it's a complicated thing because a person has to play to their strengths, right? The platform and the medium matters. The medium really does matter, and so does the message. And not every message is best suited to a specific platform, but there are so many ways to overcome that barrier because YouTube isn't just YouTube. YouTube is a video outlet that's very similar to television and what it delivers on, but also it's more than that because it's not a YouTube video isn't just a YouTube video. There are people that produce shows on YouTube, right? And web series and podcasts. So if you're an author, there's another outlet because it doesn't have to always be about selling your book. I mean, that's a tangential value of being aware of who you are. If you're an author, what I would say is consider launching a podcast and you just do it as a video podcast. Maybe it's even live to tape, or it's you and you record it, and it's maybe you and a co-host. And what you do is you get at the substance of whatever it is that you are an author of, and you make a podcast about that substance value and your intelligence and your ideas. And then people are coming for that show and they're coming for those ideas, and then they have awareness of you, and then they'll care about your books. They'll care about your books if they care about the things that you care about, right? And you have a show as a format to present that, and then there's more value to you because that doesn't matter about what genre you're writing in. You could be a fiction writer. You could be a writer that writes about issues. You could be an editorial style writer. You could be any type of writer. And being a writer by itself in many ways makes you a subject matter expert either on the genre, the niche, writing itself, or the subject matter that you're writing about. So then the podcast becomes about the subject matter, and then you are the host. And so it's not even about you. It's about the person having a mutual interest to you. And that builds your brand in a new way. And by having a podcast that's a video on YouTube, that's a search engine, and stripping the audio out for that and distributing that where podcasts are, you have all these different access points to you now to scale your brand, to drive traffic and awareness to your potential book sales because it's in the show notes. And now people care about who you are and why they've never heard of you. They look you up. And now all of a sudden you have another level of being relevant to them in a way they would have never found you otherwise. So it really does come down to just meeting people where they are. I think that so many people are hung up on this idea of, well, I want to be noticed, or I want attention, or I want to be a personality. And it's about what you offer people and what they want first up front, right? So I think that people are losing that, and that makes it confusing as to what content they can do or should make, because it's just down to, what do you have to give? What do you have to give? Everyone's hung up on what they can take and receive. They want subs. They want subscribers. They want views. They want ad revenue. They want validation. They want to be heard. I mean, hell, no one cares. What can you give them that they care about? And then you can have what you want. You can get yours after you give people what they want. And people don't think like that, and that's why they struggle. That's why they don't succeed.
That is very powerful. Thank you so much for that. And you also, one of my missions, or one of my two missions, is to be able to impact the special education, because I was labeled special ed, and they said, I was labeled, and I was made fun of. But during that, I read books, and it helped me become aware of my brains, and they didn't teach about how to learn and how to communicate or people skills. And second, I want to be able to impact the law of attraction community, or the secret. I don't know if you know that, but because they don't build upon people's skills. Can you talk about how can we make that the education better? What do you think about that?
Education is a very complex and nuanced problem, and there are a lot of challenges with it. I have tremendous empathy and sympathy for the people operating within education, because many of them are well-intentioned. Teachers are underpaid, undervalued, and they're doing their best. not all teachers go through the proper qualification and vetting, sometimes because they're operating within a broken system, and that's not entirely their fault. And some people are there, they're there to do a job. They're not passionate about it, but like we have a systemic failure in placing people in jobs that they're best suited to and that they have an aptitude for, and making sure that people are taken care of and can fulfill a purpose. And because there's such a demand and such a great need for teachers, it's an easy hole to decide to plug yourself in to fill when you're not passionate about it. The problem is that then that doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve the people that are coming to you seeking guidance and education, and that you're ultimately responsible for and responsible to. So it's a big problem that has to do with complex social economics that we're not going to solve in this interview. That being said, it's also the fact that the teachers who are good and are well-intentioned, they're underpaid, they're overworked, and they're operating within a broken, and if in the United States at least, an archaic and outdated system that's not meant to produce what is needed and what's in demand in society. As an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, I cringe at how the higher levels of education are working and what's being valued in a degree market, and the fact that they don't come back to us in the private sector, in the business world, in the small business owners, because we don't even really value a degree anymore. We only value a skill, and we only value whether we can work with somebody and whether there's trust there. We value relationship equity. Entrepreneurs and business owners only care about whether someone can do a job and whether somebody can make them more money on margin. And a degree is not a shorthand for that anymore. It's been commoditized as a way and an opportunity to a better life. And for some people it is, and I don't take away from that. I'm just pointing out that the difficulty of a small business owner is a small business owner has no interest in paying more dollars per hour just because somebody got a piece of paper that an academic who's not a practitioner says makes you more qualified. We'd rather have somebody that has a body of work and is more qualified, because if you're a student, you're not competing with other students in the job market. You're competing with somebody who's a displaced professional that moved from another town, that has 5 years, 10 years of real world experience on you, has network value, might have won awards in their niche, might be known. You're competing with that. You're also competing with the person who didn't go to school at all, that has a bigger social media presence than you and a bigger network than you, and is more known and is more respected. And you might resent that because you got a degree, but they had a skill too. And that skill was a people skill of making a deal and selling themselves. And there's a form of meritocracy to that too. And that's a qualifier too. That's why I say this is a complex issue, because there are multiple facets to why education matters. Being skilled matters though too, but the people skills and the ability to negotiate for yourself, the ability to stand up for yourself and to price yourself appropriately, the understanding of market demand, all of that's important. And I'm not sure it's translating to people. And I think they've been misled to just believe that a degree arbitrarily entitles them to a better life, when that's not true. It's not necessarily a good investment for everyone. I say that as someone who went to school but didn't finish a degree, a 4-year formal degree, that built a 6-figure business. And that before that, when working in the corporate world, was able to work at an ad agency, was able to work as a graphic designer, was able to work as a web designer, was able to work as a photographer, was able to work as a marketing manager and make good money, and went on to build a successful 6-figure business based on my skills and based on a service-based business and that model. And that wasn't about YouTube. It was about using a marketing funnel to access clients. And again, that's a skill and that is an aptitude. But all of that being said, and then later developing a successful product-based business that I'm very proud of. But the reality of education, and even special needs education, is that no one is truly being served by the current system and model of education properly, because it's not meant to address current market demand of a high level skilled job market that's being understaffed. There are jobs that we cannot fill because of a lack of qualified candidates. And then at a local level, state to state, there's a disparity of job openings that are not being staffed because the education pool of that region doesn't fit the demand of the private sector. There are jobs that are going unfulfilled, or where underqualified candidates are the only candidates available. So it's, you got to fill the job somehow. You got to get something is better than nothing. And it's because the education system is not meeting the demand of the market. And it's predicated on its own business model, and a lot of it becomes academia for academia's sake. A lot of people go into academia and then they don't get a job in the market. They end up getting a job at the school. So that's real. And then you have a cycle of people that might be teaching that are not actual practitioners that have real world applications or experience, or even if they do, it's outdated because they haven't competed in the current job market. And I'm not throwing these people under the bus. I'm saying that they have a hard job, but they're beholden to a system that doesn't allow them to operate in serving the needs that are there. And that's just the market needs. Let's talk about the individual needs for a minute. It's a system that's predicated on, if you aren't good at reading comprehension and lecture style learning, you're a loser. And that's not fair. That's not right. But it's a shorthand that they use, and it screens and weeds people out. And the problem with that is we as a society lose the potential of an individual that is a hands-on learner that way, because they get discouraged and they don't try as hard anymore. We lose the skill set of somebody that's a much more kinesthetic learner. We lose the people who have a strong sense of visual acuity and visual spatial awareness and critical thinking skills there, just because they're not good at regurgitating facts. They're not good at memorization, and they don't have the attention span one way or another to deal with lectures. And so we lose all these brilliant people that might be ADD, ADHD. You know, I dealt with that in school. And I was a quote unquote problematic student. I was always challenging my teachers. I was easily bored. I would take a B or a C on something to rush through it in 5 or 10 minutes instead of taking the full 45, because it was disinteresting to me. And then they weren't feeding me on the things that I was fascinated on. They weren't playing to my aptitudes. They were telling me I have to do this versus playing to my strengths. They were making me feel bad about beating me over the head with something that I just didn't have an aptitude for, was a weakness that wasn't going to even serve me, nor was it going to serve the needs of the job market of my declared profession. I knew that I wanted to go into things that had to deal with computers and business at a very young age, and creativity. I knew business, technology, and creativity was my trifecta at a ridiculously young age. I had that self-awareness, and that self-awareness was not rewarded. It was considered arrogance, and it was do as we say and do what we tell you. And then maybe if we're feeling generous, we'll give you the thing that you want and need. And that's broken, and it's messed up, but it's a tradition that we're beholden to. So if we don't fix the system and our way of thinking to serve the needs of individuals, to serve different learning styles, to serve people at that most basic human level, and also treat them with dignity. And if we don't give our teachers resources and the means to do those things, if we continue to underpay them, overwork them, and if we don't leave behind a system that was meant to produce farmers and factory workers to meet the market demands of small business owners, entrepreneurs, and ultimately to position to be market leaders, it's going to be a problem that we end up living with for a long time. And there will be people who are more flexible, more adaptable, more agile, and it'll be a problem in the competitive marketplace, because nobody lives in a country. We all live on a planet. The economic reality of a global marketplace is real. Entrepreneurs like myself are winning because we embrace that reality versus putting our head in the sand. We look at the global reality, and we are fighting to sell to the 7.8 billion people in the market because we can. And it's great. Instead of worrying that the fact that maybe we're in a small town that no one can afford to pay what we might be worth or what we think the market cap is, great. We can go global and we can access whoever wants to buy. It's fantastic. And as a consumer, you can buy anything you want at a price that you are willing to pay, because it's an embarrassment of riches. And that's fantastic. And I love it. It's true meritocracy. And so when you talk about special education, and special needs. It's a cause, and it's something that's very personal and I'm very passionate about. But I also understand that it's a very complex situation that doesn't have a silver bullet solution, and it requires honest conversations. But here's the problem that I see with higher education and that honest conversation. I see a problem with the fact that the student loan debt is out of control, and it's a problem, and that institutions are being reflexive and defensive because their business model is threatened by disruption and by a disenchantment with the reality of what they provide and its saturation in the marketplace. We have an abundance of 6-year degree graduates, and the market demand for those people is never really that high to begin with. It's too much and it's unnecessary. And that's not to devalue the effort and the work that those people put in or the discipline that they've shown. It's just the fact that there's a problem with your market when you're overqualified every time you look around and you can't get job placement because you're considered to be overeducated and underexperienced. But they're being the consumer is being marketed to say that this is an economic advantage when it's an economic liability that starts you at a deficit. You're in debt. You're overeducated. You've been in the education of the market longer than most people's average lifespan as an employee at a job. Most people now don't spend on average 5 years with the same employer. So the idea that you're spending 6 years in academia on a regular basis when that's not even the average lifespan of your employment, it just doesn't add up. And starting 6 figures in debt as an adult on something that you can't resell doesn't add up. At least if you had bought a house, you can flip it or you can use it as a debt weapon. At least it's an asset. At least it's a commodity at that point, right? And then the thing is, if you're not going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, education-wise, there are technical and creative skills that won't be displaced by automation that you could access and prove market value in and make above the average United States median salary fairly easily, even in a freelance or a temp work capacity. And it doesn't require a college education. It only requires vocational training, and that would be accessible at a community college level, which you could afford without acquiring massive debt, or you could acquire it through online skills and online education. The problem is that people will then argue about accreditations, but I keep explaining small business owners, which were in America, employ well over 60% of the American workforce is small business owners that have less than 100 employees. The big corporations may want those degrees. The Fortune 500 companies may want those degrees, but the majority of small business owners aren't interested. You can either get a referral or a recommendation from somebody who can vouch for you, or you can prove your work with your body of work and experience. There are enough high-paying jobs that no one's interested in hiring you based on your degree. They're interested in your actual work and your work ethic and your reputation, and that's what matters. So when you think about that, people are being, I think, misled and marketed to in a way that is predatory and dishonest when it comes to the business of higher education. And I think that people are socially shamed into spending $80,000 to $140,000 on an education that's only value is optics and a lack of social shaming.
Yes, thank you so much for that in depth. It makes me like tears a little bit because that's what like my heart is trying to say, but I couldn't say it right. Those words. I'm so grateful that you're doing this interview with me. And also, as I listen, you're also a creative. I know that you like Dragon Ball Z, and I like anime, and I love Dragon Ball Z, right? And for for you put a video of starving artists. What do you think about that? Because people have this starving artists and whatever. Can they truly make a living?
They can. You can make a living as an artist. The problem is you'll either have to become business savvy on some level, some reasonable level, and take responsibility for your own success, or you'll have to put yourself in a position to be valuable to an employer that can absorb all of the other responsibilities while valuing your craftspersonship enough to pay you well. Or you can align yourself with someone who is business savvy and let them stay in their lane and you stay in yours, and you split the revenue in a way that's appropriate there. And there are so many opportunities and outlets. You also have the ability to, again, if you become at least tech savvy, to go directly to the marketplace and monetize your abilities as a creative, but you'd have to be smart about it. You either have to be smart about how you have the capacity to operate as a service-based provider, or you have to be smart and learn the creative aspects of product development. And again, that would mean being a little bit tech savvy about the platforms available to you. If you're a pure artist and you don't want to be a starving artist, your options are to raise the level of your craftspersonship so high that someone can employ you and pay you what you're worth, or you have to have the discipline, both fiscally and business-wise, to navigate being a maker and a manager and manage your own success and be truly independent. So, I mean, but it's always been true, right? I mean, this has not really changed. You either were a highly skilled craftsperson or artisan, and you got a wealthy patron to back you, to allow you to have the freedom to do things you want, but you would have to sell out a little bit and do what that patron wants, unless they're just so big of a fan of yours. The difference is now you have the internet and social media. So you could diversify and crowdsource patronage, if you will, through getting online support for people that want what you do to exist, and you to do it independently and freedom, because there are enough people that just want to invest in that and they have some disposable income. So, I mean, I support many creatives through things like Patreon and in my own way, and frankly, by hiring them. But they have to deliver, they have to be capable. And there is a such thing as talent. Just because you think it's art doesn't mean that anyone thinks it's worth their time or money. So people also have to be somewhat realistic in their expectations of what they want. Now, the alternative that I also propose to people is, if you don't ever want to sell out or sell your art or become businessy, or you think it dilutes the value of what you have emotionally, then you have to develop a technical skill that is valuable enough that you can charge a very lucrative amount for, provide that, and make enough money to stay independent and make things for the sake of making things.
Yes, and also this, how can we get out of this bubble of feeling not to be able to charge? For example, if I want people to come to me for an interview, let's say, and because I saw a guy in an interview, an artist, who was Evan Views. He was a production manager of Teen Titan, and I charged him money for an interview. Could I also do that? But I feel uncomfortable doing that. How can I release that to do that?
Well, see, I think you have to understand the market reality of like something like an interview. I don't think that people should charge or pay for interviews if you're not the mainstream media. And I don't say that to prop up the mainstream media. I actually have the opposite point of view on many things. But the thing I respect is that the mainstream media has infrastructure and resources and a guarantee of a certain amount of reach. So economically, because they have to pay people, everybody from the people that produce the thing to the lighting people, the grips, the janitors, it makes sense that they don't do anything without a dollar attached to it because of the sheer scale of the people that they have to give jobs to. So I can disagree with them principally on certain things, but economically, I can justify a lot of the things they do based on the jobs that they provide, and it makes sense. So that matters. But there's an abundance of outlets and social media and niche things out there where there's no transactional value. So it's like if you charge for something, someone can easily just say no and go somewhere else because there's no maximum upside or guarantee for them that justifies that in their eyes. But also infrastructurally, there are things that are more robust that don't charge. So it becomes understanding the market reality. That's where I stand on something like that. Now, as an interviewer, there are other ways to monetize. Affiliate marketing is a way to monetize. Instead of charging for interviews or even paying for them, I think that there are such things as barter and trade. And I think there are other monetization methods. There are revenue sharing options. There are so many avenues in which to make money now that I don't think everything has to be transactional with other people or even with an audience. Remember, I waited 5 years to be very transactional with my audience in terms of having a product-based business, and I still don't push that aggressively toward them. I'm going to start using advertising to scale that even beyond awareness of me beyond my audience, and I'm willing to pay for a guarantee of exposure or reach through advertising. I think people neglect that social media is free traffic that you have to earn on some level, versus the fact that most people in the business world are willing to buy a guarantee of traffic. And it may not always even be quality traffic, and they take that as an acceptable loss for the price of doing business. I think most people in the social media era just don't understand that market reality.
What you say is so valuable. Thank you so much for that. I will take it in. And also, do you have any fear, and how did you overcome your fear?
Oh, I have tremendous fears. Most of my life was probably ruled by fear and anxiety and imposter syndrome and a feeling of being inadequate, a feeling of thinking of myself as ugly or lesser than. And I allowed a lot of negative talk around me from people that were trying to exploit me to shape my point of view about myself, to the point of self-loathing, depression, and being suicidal. So, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it was very binary. I was going to choose life or I was going to choose death. And I chose life. It was because I had enough presence of mind to say that I can imagine what happiness looks like. So if dying is easier, then that makes me lazy, because I'm not willing to change my circumstances or myself into attaining that happiness. And that infuriated me. So anger has always been my countermeasure to fear. Now I'm tempering myself because anger isn't healthy, but it was what I needed at the time. And the thing is, I had a lot of guilt in my young adulthood because I was a very angry person, but it was righteous anger in a way, because it was justifiable, because I was being regularly abused by people around me on a constant basis. And so that anger was justified. I'm not excusing some of my own poor behavior or my reactions or my temper, but I think that when you're conditioned by society to believe that anger is inappropriate, it devalues your humanity, because your feelings are valid because you're a human being and you are entitled to your feelings. A lot of people are very dismissive. I understand when they say things like facts don't care about your feelings, because it's true, but we're not purely logical beings and we're not purely factual beings. And so to deny our very humanity, I think is dangerous. So I think that rhetoric and the people who espouse that rhetoric are very dangerous. And I think that they're intellectually dishonest. And there are some people who aren't going to be a fan of me saying that, and that's fine. But I think about it in a very human way. You know, if nothing or facts don't care about your feelings, then people make that an issue of convenience. So like facts, because you know what? Facts shouldn't care about your feelings, because they shouldn't care about something as irrational as your love or your faith and your belief in something bigger than yourself. Those things aren't necessarily fact-based or rational either. So to deny the value of that is to deny your very humanity and something that's very special of you, and something that I think you have a right to be protective of. So I genuinely believe that. I mean, logistically and practically speaking, a young person they have the potential to contribute to society, but physically they're not as capable or able. Yet as an adult, we feel compelled to put our own life in jeopardy or at risk or on the line, or to forfeit it in favor of saving a child or an infant, even though that infant or child may not be able to fend for themselves, provide for themselves, protect themselves after we've done that. It's our instinct, and it's a valid instinct. And I think that I think it's right, even though it's impractical, even though it's logical, even though all of the facts and data, a robot would never do that. If you've ever watched the movie I, Robot, it's a conflict of the morality. It's the fact that the robot did the calculations and the math to save an adult because it had a better survival rate than a child. And as human beings, we would not run those calculations, even though we're perfectly capable of it. We'll save the child. And we're right to do that. It's appropriate for us to have that feeling in the face of those facts. So to just arbitrarily always say facts don't care about your feelings, and to say that creatively this doesn't matter or that doesn't matter. I mean, I think that these are important conversations that require a lot more depth. And so where I stand on it with fear is that fear is irrational, and you can overcome fear. And if in a temporary way, anger allows you to do that, like it did for me until I was at a higher level. And then I was able to now I had to deal with anger after I dealt with fear, right? Because, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, in my case, self-hatred, which leads to suffering. So, and you lash out at other people, maybe they don't deserve it. These are bad experiences that a lot of people have. But the thing is, to be told that your anger is fundamentally wrong is to deny your sense of self-preservation, to deny, which is where I'm going with this, to deny the fact that your anger is coming from a wrong that was done you, or an injustice that you're experiencing, or a part of you that has been denied. And that's fair. That's something that you should be angry about. You should respond. It is the appropriate human response to a wrong that you see or that you feel very deeply. Now, what you do with that anger becomes important. Do you use that to galvanize you toward productive work and change? Do you use that anger as fuel to invigorate you to change the situation and circumstance in a meaningful way, in a way that is positive and that is appropriate within the construct of rule and law, right? And fairness to people? Because the problem is that if you're angry, sometimes you're unfair to people or unkind to people. And I say that from experience. So I overcame fear through tapping into my honest emotions and recognizing why I was afraid. And sometimes then the response to that was anger. Sometimes the response to it was patience. Sometimes the response to it was a need for deeper understanding, or a need for self-awareness and self-examination or recrimination. So I think that fear can only be fought by seeking truth, seeking what your truth is. And a personal truth can be independent of facts. I do believe strongly that facts matter, and I can't stand anti-intellectualism or pseudo-intellectualism, but I also think that truth has an appropriate non-objective quality in humanity, in your actual instincts of self-preservation, of fairness, of kindness, of conservation of life, of empathy. I think that those things are just as real and just as valid as math. And I think that it's because we're human beings and not robots.
Yes, thank you so much for being alive, actually, I wanted to say, because I actually wanted to die a long time ago because I broke up with my ex. I felt lost. I didn't have any meaning. I was searching for answers. And thank you for, you are a very beautiful soul because you care for people, and you know that, so many of us are hiding who we truly are, and that's my message, is that we shouldn't hide, and so many of that we have to hide our truth, and that's like, it's like the Matrix, right? You can like see, but thank you so much for being alive. And
you have to be very self-aware, and you have to understand that carrying truth requires strength that you may not currently have. I want people to be careful about flirting with radical honesty, because I don't think that most people have the strength to withstand it. And I think that we have a movement where people are trying to embrace radical honesty very rapidly, without understanding the repercussions or the ability to alienate people or agitate people, because you don't have to execute on radical honesty from a place of lacking empathy or being dismissive or cruel toward people. And I think that the lack of understanding of that nuance, and I think those things fall short with the average person, because we have a sentiment now where everyone feels so entitled to say everything on their mind without being thoughtful toward other people, but also lacking any self-preservation instinct and just wanting to evade any consequences for what they do or say. And that's not practical. And it's not fair to you or to other people, because you're not serving your own best judgment or your own best instincts or your, for lack of a better term, your better angels when you do that, right? So I think that people have to be careful with their understanding of truth and honesty. And I think that radical honesty is not something more people should embrace, because I just don't think they have the stomach for it. And I don't think that they have the appreciation of nuance and empathy to do it without being crass or dismissive or divisive. And I also don't think that most people are in a position socially or economically to withstand the consequences.
That is so powerful. Thank you so much for that.
Words matter.
Yes. What does over the years success has changed for you? What does success look like to you?
I don't know that success has changed for me. There's a difference between success and goals. There's a difference between moving the goalpost, which I constantly do because I'm neurotic as hell. I'm never satisfied, and that's the curse of being ambitious. And that's fine. But the thing is, I don't think success changes you. I think it reveals you. And I think that people need to accept that success isn't permanent and failure isn't final. And so I am very careful. I understand from an aspirational standpoint and also from a gratitude standpoint that I have to acknowledge my success and use the title of being successful. But I'm very careful about saying it to myself, because it's not imposter syndrome to say that I don't believe in my own success. It's that my goals are much more lofty than my current capacity to execute. And thus, I'm on a journey of improvement and refinement and fortifying myself and scaling myself, and also recognizing my limitations and that I need other people. And thus, success can be micro success in being the incremental recognition of those things and those facts. But macro success is also acknowledging that I'm nowhere near the peak of my limitations, the peak of my ability to accomplish things, and that I have much more to give. I have much more to give. And so that's why in my own mind, I don't consider myself to be truly successful, because I don't feel like I've attained my potential or that I'm delivering on my potential. But at the same time, in humility, I'm grateful and acknowledge what I have, what I've worked for. And I acknowledge that my situation is very fortunate, and that it's very fortunate by comparison to the past version of myself, even just a few years ago. The gap between where I was and where I came, I'm very grateful for. I'm very grateful for where I am versus my awareness of where other people are. But I would never go so far as to call myself privileged, because that implies that something was handed to me or was outside of my own control. And I'm careful with the word privilege because it does exist on some levels, but you have to be careful with that. Not because of riling people up or alienating people, or because I think that when people get riled up about that, I just think they're soft. I think they have a glass jaw. The reality is that in identifying privilege, I put it down to something that was outside of your control. And I think everyone underestimates how much power they actually have. If there is a message that I would want to get across to people, is that they have no idea how powerful they are. So to use the word privilege is dismissive of individual potential and power sometimes, of what you can execute on, the ability to act. Personal power. Tony Robbins said this. Personal power is the ability to act. If you think about, quote unquote, what people consider privilege, if you strip away the resources, the name, the reputation, and you boil someone down to what they're capable of doing with their mind and body and their sheer force of will, you see what their power level is. My abilities were never predicated on privilege. Now, here's what is predicated on privilege. I was privileged to be born in the United States of America. My father is an immigrant from Panama, Canal Zone, Panama, where he was born. One of four brothers at the time before his younger siblings were born in the States. My father came from nothing in a country that didn't even give you secondary education. You had to earn the right to secondary education, something we're very privileged to have here in the United States. So I'm privileged that I was born in America. I could have been born one of the 1.6 billion people in extreme poverty living on $1 a day. So I'm grateful that I was born in America. I could have been born in the 1600s, in which case being black isn't so great. I could have been born in the 1950s, in which case being black isn't so great. I could have been born in the 1960s, in which case being black isn't so great. I was born in the 80s, so awesome for me. So I'm privileged to be born in the time and era that I was. I'm privileged to be born in the millennial generation, a generation that is a transitional generation that understands the evolution of technology, has only known a life of constant disruption, and thus is the most adaptable generation, even beyond Generation Z and Generation Alpha, because we weren't born with a certain level of technology, but we saw it develop. We understand the potential of things and we understand change. And thus, I think that we will take less things for granted than them. Now, there are advantages that Gen Z and Generation Alpha do have, but I think, and there are advantages that Gen X has. There are advantages that the boomers have. But I don't think we're by far even the worst generation. I think we're a generation that has produced many more self-made millionaires and billionaires probably than any other one. At least when you add it all up. And in terms of an independent workforce of people that are independently employed, I think we produced the highest capacity of that as well. And entrepreneurship and skill development and individual responsibility, I think, is strongest in our generation. That being said, I'm privileged to be a part of that. I'm privileged to be born to the parents that I had. Michelle and Roberto were very good to me, and I got great DNA, so that's fantastic for me. And I'm privileged to have awesome DNA, and I'm privileged to have had awesome parents that let me be who I was and who I wanted to be, and did what they could with their limited means and resources to enable me to do that. I'm privileged and blessed to have 3 amazing, awesome siblings that look up to me and are wonderful people in their own right and have tremendous potential and have been so loving and supportive toward me and everything that I do. And I am I'm blessed and privileged to be born in America. I'm blessed and privileged to have my family. I'm blessed and privileged to be born in the time that I'm in. And I'm blessed and privileged to have been born with my health and my strength and my capabilities. And therein lies my privilege. Therein lies the things that I couldn't control, that I didn't earn, that I wasn't entitled to, that were a blessing. There ends my privilege. And because everything else I worked for, I built, I suffered for, I fought for, and I took it. And so that's what personal power is. What you can do once you go beyond the things that were out of your control, the things that you didn't earn by your own strength and your own merit, you can call those things privilege. And all of us have our own version of privilege. There are plenty of people I know that were born to families with money that had wildly abusive, horrible parents, but they had money and they treated them like crap. And their life spiraled out of control, and all the money and privilege couldn't keep them from developing addiction and depression or committing suicide. So it's like being born to money could be one form of privilege and deny you a completely access to a whole nother level of privilege. So, I think about that. I think about that all the time. I think about people who are successful and the fact that there's so many people in startup culture, celebrity culture, online social media, like the amount of suicide and the mental health issues among people that are the envy of everyone around them and everybody in the peanut gallery is something that is not talked about, because the demons in your head don't care about your privilege. They don't discriminate.
Thank you so much for that. You sound just like Gary Vee, man. I know you. I know you love him. I know you.
Gary is someone that just, for me, he wasn't a revelation in saying things that I didn't know. He was like, great, I'm not insane. Somebody else gets it. Like, so that's what I love about Gary. Gary's so generous. Gary's so generous and he's so real. And that's why people like him. I'm flattered by the comparison, but I'm my own dude. I had my own path. But the thing is, I had a very similar childhood to Gary, having an immigrant father and a father that wasn't always present, because my father served this country that we're so blessed to be in. He served in the Marine Corps, 27 years, retired a E9 Master Gunnery Sergeant, which only 6% of all Marines ever achieve the rank. So I'm very proud of my father's service, but it meant that he wasn't always around. I mean, that's what being a military brat is, right? So I relate to Gary in the fact that I didn't understand my father until I became an adult and I became a man. And that's when my relationship with my father became better. I didn't understand a lot of what he went through as an immigrant here in America. I didn't understand a lot of the things he was up against. And I also didn't understand a lot of the realities and harshness of his childhood and the things he did for us, and the way that he couldn't always relate to me because of my level of privilege compared to his. It strained a lot of our relationship because I couldn't ever appreciate or understand that until I became an adult and was capable of much more complex thoughts and tremendous empathy. And I have a whole different level of gratitude based on that. So when Gary talks about a lot of these things, the reason that we sound very similar is because we've had similar life experiences that have shaped the men that we became, and the respect that we have for our fathers and their hard work, and our mothers and their emotional support and lovingness toward us, and the foundation of our self-esteem that they provided us with. In that regard, I had a very similar childhood and upbringing to Gary in that regard. And I was also the oldest son. So there are a lot of parallels and a lot of similarities that I think produced similar life perspectives or philosophies in myself, Gary Vee, Evan Carmichael, Grant Cardone, so many people, Pat Flynn, Philip DeFranco. There's so many people to where their experiences that we had in life. I mean, Philip DeFranco being bullied in high school and being overweight and not liking his appearance. I wasn't overweight and I was athletic, but I was also the scrawny kid and I was like shorter than everybody. And, I was put down too. There's so many things they're like being broke in college in those early 20 years. There's so many similar challenges or struggles or life experiences that make people who they are, that it's not surprising that there's overlap between you and some of your peers and contemporaries when you really think about those shared life experiences, right?
Yes, that's very true. I was bullied once, or made fun of when I was in the school. But thank you so much for that. And two more questions. What is your favorite character in Dragon Ball Z?
The character that I think I identify with the most is probably Future Trunks. And I also like his character design and his personality. But my favorite character from a narrative and character development perspective, and I also understand this character, I think, intimately, is probably Vegeta, because I feel he represents across the franchise the deepest, most complex character writing and the overall most character growth. And I think that people don't understand being a Vegeta fan, because it's easy to be a Goku, a Gohan fan, or whatever, or a Piccolo fan. I mean, that's easy. But if you appreciate growth and learning from your mistakes and recrimination and self-awareness and changing your life values, and you also appreciate the idea of redemption, then I think it's got to be Vegeta. Vegeta was born a prince, and he cared, like he despite whatever he says, he cared for his father and he respected his father. You see that in the flashbacks and everything like that. There was a relationship there, and his father clearly cared for him and had invested a lot of his pride in him. His pride is not just his own; it's the pride of a warrior race. It's the pride of his bloodline, his family, his lineage, his father. And it's that he was denied a lot of its potential at an early age, and he was exploited and put down upon. His people were put down upon. He was a minority in that regard. Despite being born to a strong lineage and privilege, he was a prince who became a pauper. He always was forced to have a chip on his shoulder and defend his place and his pride to other people. He was looked down upon. And at the same time, his subordinates, then, like, they experienced similar things to him, sure, and they were comrades and they shared experiences, but they never really understood what he lost. And they also were men of very limited ambition themselves. He had something to fight for and to reclaim in a way that Raditz and Nappa didn't. He had that in a way that Goku doesn't. And he's not in any way simple-minded or one-dimensional. And he's not purely evil either. He's a great example of an anti-hero. And he presented with different opportunities. He showed his potential and his growth, right? He was willing to make unconventional alliances and even formed a respect for Krillin and Gohan during the Namek arc. And in his own way, he looked out for them. There was plenty of opportunities in ways where he looked out for Gohan and was not going to let, his teammate go down. There were things where you saw the relationship and the contention with him with Frieza, where he was robbed of choice. He was robbed of agency. He was robbed of independence. And he had to swallow a lot of his pride, his defining characteristic, the thing that he developed, that he built his self-worth around. His prowess, his lineage, his bloodline. These are things that were all undermined by a singular individual that he could do nothing about and that he could never confront. And then he also believed in his own skills and his ability and his superiority. And then he had that thrown in his face by being defeated by Goku, by Kakarot, a low-level warrior with no lineage and no claim. It was another chip on his shoulder. And the fact that, but on the other hand, it's like, but he's one of mine, the only rival, the only person in the entire universe who can give me a good fight, the only person who can push me to my absolute limit to be better. At least it's one of my own. So he still has a very deep sense of identity and pride in his Saiyan heritage. So as someone who comes from an immigrant family, I can appreciate that story of being an outcast, of having pride in where you come from and who your people are. There's something very compelling about Vegeta in that regard. And then given the opportunity to become a family man, he did. And he was a much more present family man even than Goku. And that, I think, is very telling of what his values are as someone that comes from a proud lineage and knows his own people in a way that Goku didn't. Goku is very much a restless spirit, a wanderer, and despite his ability to change and to elevate people, I don't think that Goku truly forms deep bonds and friendships with people. I don't really see him in that regard. I think that he espouses those things, but I think Goku is more solitary than Vegeta. Vegeta was solitary based on the chip on his shoulder, given the opportunity to form connections even against the experiences and the trauma of his life and even against his past sins. He did so. That's something to overcome. Goku has only ever had to overcome external obstacles. Goku has never had a crisis of faith, a challenge of character, a trial of spirit. Vegeta has. And that's why I think he is the most truly powerful and compelling character narratively in Dragon Ball.
Hmm. Thank you so much for that. And also, what make you love anime?
I think it's a combination of art style, storytelling, the fact that my favorite uncle introduced me into it when I was very young. I think it's the fact that unlike Western animation, it explores dark and complex themes much more often, and it provides a variety of genres in a different way. It also pays very much homage to a deep and rich mythology and culture, and it's not afraid to even step out of its own mythology and culture. It's not scared to build complex mechanics into itself. And then sometimes it also isn't afraid to just present good, mindless fun, but in a very stylized, colorful way. And I think that we've seen in recent years Western animation adapt and borrow quite heavily from that because of its appeal. It's something that was very culture centric, that yet managed to get broad global appeal in a very unique way. And I think there's something to that. So I really appreciate the historical value that exists within anime, and its depth of and variety of genre, the difference in variety of styles and approach. There's just so much there. I think it's the depth that appeals to me.
Yes, thank you so much. What? How do you like? Don't because I get this all the time where people say anime is like for kids. How do you see that?
I think that media doesn't have an age gate. And I think that it's a naive and very ignorant, limited view of things. Um, there are adults that enjoy Harry Potter. Like, I mean, there are adults that enjoyed Animorphs during Kay Applegate's run. I grew up with it as a kid and I enjoyed it because she didn't complete the series until I was an adult. Um, but the same people who complain about that, they go and they watch movies like The Hunger Games and things like that were written as young adult fiction, right? And it grosses in the box office. So I don't think that matters. Grown adults, myself included, still love going to Disney World and Disneyland. I don't think that dictates maturity. I don't think it dictates anything about your standing or your masculinity if you enjoy. I mean, cartoons historically were not even made for children. Look at I think it's people who are naive and ignorant to the history of animation. The animation that was done during World War II. Think about that. That was not for children. It was levity and for adults to take their mind off of things that were very traumatic and depressing. Look at the Tex Avery and Chuck Jones run of animation of the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. That was not meant for children. It was something that children gravitated to because it was bright and colorful. But the crux of animation and even the things Walter Disney did, a lot of it was based on the fact that in many ways there were just limitations on what you could do with live action and actors and things like that animation allows for. And again, the themes in many cases, there's things there for children, but there's also things that are snuck in there for adults that have the capacity to see it. So I don't believe in that argument. I think it's an argument that can be easily debated by bringing up history and facts to people who are ignorant and don't have a counter argument other than how they feel, and they don't get it. I mean, I could easily be dismissive of people's obsession with their favorite sports team to the point of painting their face and standing out in the freezing cold. Like that, I could make fun of that very easily with facts and logic, a lot more easily than someone can debate the value of appreciating animation as an adult.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Are you into Bleach? How do you think of live action for Bleach?
I'm not super into Bleach. I watched it. I just couldn't really get into it. There just wasn't, I guess, something there for me that resonated. Live action wise, I think they just have to be very thoughtful in casting. I think that they um, have to very much pay attention to the story beats and honor the source material. Um, but I think that the problem with anything like that is adapting something to live action is hard. But I also think that if you're going to tap into the phenomenon of a fan base like that, and every writer wants to add their own original thing. They don't want to just do an adaptation or regurgitate somebody else's work. that's creatively unsatisfying, but you have to set aside ego to honor the source material first when you present something, and then you can expand on it in a way that explores something that fans will accept because you're telling an untold story or adding a depth or a dimension, and that's where you have freedom to be creative. But you have to upfront prove good faith and honor the source material first, or you deserve any backlash you get from the fans.
Yes, and that would mean also, what do you think about?
Within reason. Within reason. I have to
Yes.
clarify. Within reason, because don't be an asshole.
What do you think about Dragon Ball Evolution? That's, oh my god.
Trash. Because it failed the mandate of what I just said. Moving on.
Okay. All right. Where can we find you online?
You can find me in all social media at Roberto Blake. If you're interested in working with me and reaching out, you can go to awesomecreatoracademy.com for coaching and courses and digital products. We also have an awesome free blog that you can sign up for. We usually also put out a free video training if you sign up for the emails. They can also find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Roberto Blake 2, just like the number 2. And they can also check out the Create Something Awesome Today podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and wherever podcasts are found.
Yes, thank you so much. Can we do one more thing? Can we do like a Kamehameha thing? Like,
I'm not up to it. I can't do it justice, man. You're gonna have to settle for any line from Emperor Palpatine that you want.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Your feeble skills are no match for the powers of the dark side.
Oh yeah, Kamehameha! Okay, guys, that's it for today. Subscribe to my channel, like my video, and I'll see you guys next time.